Her victory seemed certain. Then the human appeared, and the arena fell. Quiet. The Grand Nexus Arena stretched across 3 kilometers of Kepler Station's central hub, its walls gleaming with energy shields that could withstand planetary bombardment. Today, like every cycle for the past 3 years, all eyes in the galaxy were focused on one being. Zixara stood at the center of the arena floor, her crystalline exoskeleton catching the light from 1,000 different suns. She was magnificent and terrifying. Nearly 4 meters tall, with 4 powerful arms that could crush steel and electromagnetic abilities that made her a living weapon. Her species, the Chronari, had ruled the Eastern Spiral for millennia, and she was their greatest champion. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all classifications, the arena announcer's voice boomed across the stadium in 300 different languages simultaneously. Welcome to the final day of the 847th Trials of Worthiness. The crowd erupted. Beings from across the known galaxy filled the massive stadium, crystalline ethereals floating in their energy fields, insectoid hive minds clustered in perfect formations, gaseous cloud walkers drifting in specialized atmospheric bubbles, and dozens of other species. The noise was incredible, a symphony of cheers, clicks, harmonics, and electromagnetic pulses that would have deafened a human. But no humans were present. Why would they be? Earth was a backwater world on the far edge of nowhere, home to a species so new to galactic politics that most beings had never even heard of them. Ambassador Thexel of the Confederation adjusted his translation device and leaned forward in his viewing pod. As the official observer, he had seen every trial for the past 50 cycles. None had been as significant as this one. The prize this cycle, the announcer continued, represents the greatest reward in trial history. Exclusive mining rights to Sector 7 Alpha, recently discovered to contain quantum-fold crystals worth more than the combined treasuries of 12 major worlds. The crowd's excitement reached fever pitch. Quantum-fold crystals were the foundation of faster-than-light travel. Whoever controlled them would control galactic trade routes for the next 1,000 years. Zixara barely moved as holographic displays showed the 12 opponents she had already defeated. The Titanium Lords of Vega Prime, known for their unbreakable armor, crushed by her electromagnetic pulses. The Shadow Dancers of the Void Nebula, masters of stealth and illusion, outmaneuvered by her tactical brilliance. The Plasma Warriors of Binary Sun, living beings of pure energy, absorbed and redirected by her crystalline structure. Each victory had been decisive. Each victory had been inevitable. She makes it look easy, whispered Trade Minister Colvin to his aide. 3 cycles undefeated, 47 challenges won. The Chronari will control the new sector, and we'll all have to pay their prices for quantum-fold access. His aide nodded nervously. Everyone knew what Chronari control meant. They were brilliant, powerful, and completely merciless in business. They would squeeze every credit from the galaxy's need for those crystals. Down in the arena, Zixara tested her electromagnetic field, sending crackling blue energy dancing between her 4 arms. The arena's sensors immediately adjusted the environmental controls, calibrating for what promised to be another display of overwhelming power. She had trained for this her entire life. Chronari children learned combat before they learned to speak properly. Their society was built on strength, strategy, and the electromagnetic gifts that made them natural rulers. She had mastered every form of combat, every tactical scenario, every environmental challenge the galaxy could throw at her. Honored champion, the announcer called to her, you face your final challenge today. Victory here will grant your people control of Sector 7 Alpha and cement your place as the greatest trial warrior in galactic history. Zixara's 4 arms spread wide, electromagnetic energy crackling around her in a display that made the arena's shields flicker. The crowd loved it. This was what they came to see. Power, dominance, the natural order of strong conquering weak. "I'm ready," she replied, her voice carrying clearly across the stadium through electromagnetic modulation. "No force in this galaxy can stand against the might of the Chronari." The betting pools that operated throughout galactic space showed odds of 847 to 1 in Zixara's favor. Some gamblers from the Outer Rim had put their entire life savings on her victory. It seemed like the safest bet in the universe. Ambassador Thexel reviewed his notes one final time. His report would go to the Galactic Council within hours of the trial's conclusion. Chronari supremacy confirmed, he had already written. Recommend immediate diplomatic accommodation to new reality. The arena's massive screens showed real-time footage from around the galaxy. On Chronari Prime, millions gathered in public squares to watch their champion's inevitable victory. On the worlds that had already fallen to her might, beings watched with resigned acceptance. The galaxy was about to change, and everyone knew it. "Now," the announcer said, building dramatic tension, "let us reveal today's final challenger." The arena's central platform began to rise from the floor. Traditionally, this was when the crowd would see some massive warrior, some enhanced being bristling with weapons and technology, some representative of a major galactic power making one last desperate attempt to prevent Chronari dominance. Instead, something impossible happened. The platform revealed a single figure, small and strange, wearing simple environmental gear and carrying what looked like a basic equipment pack. The being was bipedal, roughly humanoid in shape, but barely 2 meters tall, smaller than most galactic species' children. The arena fell completely silent. For the first time in 3 cycles, Zixara looked genuinely surprised. Her electromagnetic senses swept over the newcomer, analyzing for hidden weapons, cybernetic enhancements, psionic abilities, or any sign of threat. She found nothing. The being registered as completely ordinary by every measure she knew. "Presenting," the announcer said, his voice uncertain for the first time anyone could remember, "the representative of Earth, species designation, human." The silence stretched on. In the viewing pods, trade ministers checked their star charts. Earth? Where was Earth? Most had never heard of it. Ambassador Thexel quickly accessed his diplomatic databases. Earth, Class M planet, third orbit, Sol system, Orion arm, recent contact established, technological level, primitive, military capability, negligible, political importance, none. He looked down at the small figure standing calmly in the center of the arena. This had to be some kind of mistake, some bureaucratic error. Humans weren't even a spacefaring species by most standards. They had barely managed to establish a few colonies in their own system. Zixara activated her combat protocols, but found herself hesitating. This wasn't a warrior. This wasn't even a proper challenge. This was... What was this? The human looked up at the massive alien champion, raised one hand in what might have been a greeting, and said something that the translators rendered as, "Hello, I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez. I'm looking forward to learning from you." Learning? Not conquering, not defeating, not even surviving. Learning? The arena remained quiet, thousands of beings struggling to understand what they were seeing. This was the final challenge to decide the fate of the galaxy's most valuable resource. This small, ordinary being from a world no one had heard of? Zixara's electromagnetic field flickered with confusion. In all her preparations, in all her strategic planning, she had never considered a scenario like this. For the first time in 3 cycles, the outcome of a trial was genuinely uncertain. The arena held its breath, waiting to see what would happen when the impossible met the inevitable. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the Grand Nexus arena, completely calm despite being surrounded by the strangest collection of beings she had ever seen. Her heart was beating fast. She was nervous, certainly, but her training as both a scientist and an athlete had taught her to use nervousness as fuel rather than let it control her. The silence in the arena was so complete that she could hear the hum of the energy shields protecting the crowd. Thousands of alien eyes, sensors, and consciousness fields were focused on her, trying to understand what they were seeing. "This is ridiculous!" shouted someone from the viewing pods in a language the translators rendered as angry clicking sounds. "Humans? They barely qualify as a space-capable species. This is an insult to the trials." More voices joined in. Trade Minister Colvin was frantically checking his data tablets. "Earth's entire military could fit in a single Chronari battleship," he muttered to his aide. "What are they thinking? This will be over in seconds." In the premium viewing section, Ambassador Thexel was having similar thoughts. He had read Earth's contact files during the opening ceremonies. Humans had achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Their longest space journey had been to their neighboring star system. They had no major military victories, no conquered territories, no advanced technologies that other species envied. So why were they here? Down in the arena, Zixara was conducting her own analysis. Her electromagnetic senses were incredibly sophisticated. They could detect the smallest technological implants, the faintest energy signatures, even the electrical patterns of thought in most species' brains. The human showed nothing unusual, no cybernetic enhancements, no energy weapons, no psionic abilities. Her equipment pack contained what looked like basic survival gear, some kind of medical supplies, and several small devices that registered as simple scientific instruments. "Dr. Elena Vasquez," Zixara said, her voice carrying across the arena through electromagnetic modulation. "You are the champion Earth sends to face me?" Elena looked up at the towering crystalline warrior. Even knowing what to expect from the way briefing files, Zixara was impressive in person. The way electromagnetic energy danced around her four arms was both beautiful and terrifying. "I'm their representative, yes," Elena replied through her translation device. "Though I should mention, I'm not really a warrior. I'm a xenobiologist. I study how different life forms adapt to their environments." The crowd erupted in confused murmurs. A scientist? They had sent a scientist to the trials of worthiness? Zixara's electromagnetic field flickered with what might have been amusement. A scientist. Earth sends a scientist to challenge the greatest warrior in galactic history. "Well," Elena said, adjusting her equipment pack, "Earth didn't exactly have a lot of time to prepare. We only learned about the trials 3 months ago. I volunteered because I was curious about how different species approach challenges." Curious. Not confident, not determined to win, not seeking glory. Curious. Ambassador Thexel was rapidly updating his report. This was either the greatest act of diplomatic insanity he had ever witnessed, or he couldn't think of an or. It was just insanity. The arena announcer, still struggling with the unprecedented situation, finally found his voice. "Honored beings, the final trial will now commence. Contestants will face 5 challenges designed to test every aspect of worthiness: adaptability, intelligence, strength, strategy, and spirit." The arena floor began to shift and change. Walls rose from hidden panels, atmospheric processors hummed to life, and gravity generators started their calibration sequences. Within minutes, the comfortable environment had transformed into something else entirely. "Challenge 1, the announcer declared. "Survival in hostile environment. The methane storms of Kepler 442b, with gravity 4 times galactic standard." Elena felt her knees nearly buckle as the gravity increased. The atmosphere, filled with swirling, toxic methane clouds that would kill most oxygen-breathing species in seconds. The temperature dropped to well below freezing, and violent winds began howling through the artificial landscape. Zixara barely seemed to notice the changes. Her crystalline exoskeleton was naturally resistant to temperature extremes. Her electromagnetic abilities let her create protective fields around herself, and her 4 powerful arms easily handled the increased gravity. She began moving forward through the storm with steady, determined steps. Elena, meanwhile, immediately dropped to one knee and began pulling devices from her equipment pack. Her environmental suit was keeping her alive, but barely. The gravity was crushing. The cold was seeping through her protective layers, and the methane winds threatened to knock her over with each gust. "The human's failing already," someone in the crowd observed. "She can't even stand properly." But Elena wasn't trying to stand. She was working. Her hands moved quickly over her instruments: atmospheric analyzer, terrain mapper, wind velocity, detector. Instead of fighting the environment, she was studying it. "Interesting," she murmured to herself, watching the readouts. "The methane density varies with altitude. The winds follow predictable patterns based on the artificial topography. And the gravity field isn't perfectly uniform. There are lighter zones near the eastern wall where the generators overlap." While Zixara powered through the storm in a straight line, electromagnetic fields blazing around her like a protective cocoon, Elena was taking a completely different approach. She moved carefully from shelter to shelter, behind artificial rocks, in the shadows of the terrain features, always staying low where the methane was less dense. Zixara reached the first checkpoint in exactly 12 minutes, her time displayed. On the arena's massive screens, she had used brute force and superior technology to overcome every obstacle. The crowd cheered. This was what they expected from a Chronari champion. Elena reached the same checkpoint 14 minutes later, but something was different. Her environmental suit's power readings showed she had used 40% less energy than projected. Her vital signs were stable. She wasn't exhausted, she was thinking. "How did she do that?" Trade Minister Colvin asked his aide. "The readings show she should have been struggling much more." His aide was equally confused. "She's moving like she knows the environment, but it's artificially generated. No one can know it." Ambassador Thexel was watching Elena more carefully now. There was something about the way she moved, not like someone fighting the environment, but like someone who had found a way to work with it. The second checkpoint required crossing a field of unstable terrain where methane geysers erupted randomly. Zixara used her electromagnetic abilities to sense the underground pressure changes and avoided the worst of the eruptions, crossing in 8 minutes. Elena approached the same challenge completely differently. Instead of avoiding the geysers, she timed them. She watched the patterns, made calculations on her small computer, and then began moving in a rhythm that used the eruptions themselves as stepping stones. When geysers erupted, the pressure changes created brief areas of lower gravity that she could jump between. She crossed in 7 minutes and 30 seconds. The arena fell quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. This time, it was the silence of realization that something unexpected was happening. Zixara stopped at the third checkpoint and turned to look at Elena's approach. Her electromagnetic senses had been monitoring the human throughout the challenge, trying to understand what she was witnessing. Elena wasn't stronger than her. Elena wasn't faster or tougher or more technologically advanced, but Elena was doing something Zixara had never seen before. Elena was learning the environment faster than it could challenge her. "Challenge 1 complete," the announcer declared. "Both contestants have successfully navigated the hostile environment. Preparation time for Challenge 2 begins now." As the methane cleared and the gravity returned to normal, Elena stood up and began checking her equipment. She was tired, but not exhausted. More importantly, she was smiling. "That was fascinating," she said to herself, making notes on her tablet. The interaction between artificial gravity and atmospheric pressure created some really interesting micro-environments. Zixara stared at the small human. For 47 previous challenges, She had faced opponents who tried to match her strength, outthink her strategy, or overwhelm her with superior technology. Elena was doing none of those things. Elena was treating the trial like a learning experience, and somehow, impossibly, it was working. For the first time in 3 cycles, Zixara felt something she had almost forgotten: uncertainty. In the viewing pods, beings from across the galaxy were having similar realizations. Earth's representative wasn't just surviving the challenges, she was approaching them in ways no one had considered before. Ambassador Thexel deleted the sentence, "Chronari supremacy confirmed," from his report and started typing something entirely different. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous opponent wasn't the strongest or the smartest. Sometimes it was the one who saw everything as an opportunity to learn something new. The arena's environment shifted again, this time creating something far more complex than hostile weather. The floor became a vast, 3-dimensional maze that extended both above and below the contestants. Geometric shapes floated in impossible configurations, their surfaces covered with symbols that hurt to look at directly. "Challenge 2, the announcer declared, his voice somehow managing to sound both excited and nervous. The multi-dimensional reasoning test combined with level 5 psychic interference. Contestants must solve the spatial puzzle while defending against mental attacks designed to disrupt cognitive function. In the viewing pods, several species leaned forward with interest. The ethereal collective, beings of pure energy who existed, partly outside normal space-time, were particularly focused. Their representative, a shimmering field of golden light, pulsed with anticipation. "Now we will see true capability," the ethereal communicated through harmonic frequencies. "Physical challenges can be overcome with technology. Mental challenges reveal the essence of consciousness itself." Zixara studied the floating puzzle pieces, her 4 arms already moving in complex patterns as electromagnetic energy danced between her fingers. Chronari minds were built for tactical analysis. They could process multiple battle scenarios simultaneously and calculate probability matrices faster than most computers. Elena stood at her starting position, looking up at the impossible geometry. With the same expression she had worn when studying the methane storm, she pulled out a small notebook and began sketching. "Beginning psychic interference. Now," announced the arena's AI. The attack hit both contestants simultaneously. It felt like needles made of pure thought stabbing into their minds, trying to scatter their concentration and fill their heads with confusion and fear. Zixara's crystalline structure flared with protective energy. Chronari had natural resistance to mental attacks. Their electromagnetic nature made their thoughts hard to influence. She began solving the puzzle with methodical precision, each piece fitting into place as she calculated angles and spatial relationships. Elena didn't seem to notice the psychic attack at all. Ambassador Thexel checked his readings twice. "Are the sensors malfunctioning?" he asked his aide. "It shows. The human is receiving full psychic interference, but her brain patterns are completely stable." His aide was equally confused. "The readings are correct, sir. She's definitely being attacked, but it's like the attack is just sliding off her mind." Down in the arena, Elena was having what appeared to be a normal conversation with herself while sketching puzzle pieces in her notebook. "Okay, so if I rotate this section here? No, that doesn't work. But what if the geometry isn't fixed? What if it's supposed to change based on the observer's perspective?" She moved to a different position and looked at the same puzzle piece. From this angle, it appeared completely different. "Oh, that's clever. It's not really 3-dimensional at all. It's multidimensional, being projected down to 3 dimensions. The solution isn't about moving pieces, it's about finding the right viewing angle." Zixara paused in her methodical solving and looked over at Elena. How was the human talking so casually? The psychic interference should have been overwhelming. For a species with no natural mental defenses, More importantly, how was Elena approaching the puzzle so differently? In the ethereal collective's viewing section, excited harmonic pulses were being exchanged. Impossible, one ethereal communicated. The human mind is completely unlike anything we have encountered. The psychic attack finds nothing to grip onto. Explain, requested another. Most consciousness is rigid. It has fixed patterns, established pathways, predictable structures. Our attacks work by disrupting these patterns. But the human mind, it has no fixed patterns. It changes constantly, adapts continuously. There is nothing stable enough to disrupt. Meanwhile, in the hive mind section, the insectoid collective was buzzing with confusion. Their representative, Queen Voice Clixandra, was experiencing something unprecedented. Individual consciousness should not be capable of such flexibility, she clicked to her attendants. Our hive mind achieves stability through millions of connected thoughts. How does a single mind maintain function while changing so rapidly? Elena had moved to 3 different viewing positions now, each time seeing the puzzle from a completely new perspective. She wasn't trying to force the pieces to fit her understanding. She was changing her understanding to fit the pieces. Perspective. Shift number 4, she noted in her book. From here, the red section actually connects to... Wait, the symbols are changing too. They're not fixed text. They're dynamic based on viewing angle and maybe even emotional state. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them while thinking about the first challenge. The symbols immediately shifted to show patterns related to atmospheric pressure and wind dynamics. The puzzle responds to mental state, she said, grinning. It's not just testing spatial reasoning, it's testing adaptability of thought itself. Zixara had solved approximately 60% of the puzzle using pure computational power and electromagnetic manipulation. It was an impressive display of chronari capabilities, and under normal circumstances, it would have been more than enough to win. But Elena was approaching 75% completion, and she was accelerating. Trade Minister Colvin was frantically updating his economic projections. If Earth develops this kind of problem-solving capability on a larger scale, he muttered to his aide, it could revolutionize everything. Trade routes, resource management, conflict resolution. His aide nodded nervously. Should we consider opening trade negotiations with Earth, sir? Are you crazy? Earth barely has anything to trade. They're pre-industrial by galactic standards. But even as he said it, Colvin was reconsidering. Maybe Earth's value wasn't in what they had, but in how they thought. Back in the arena, Elena had made another breakthrough. The final section isn't a puzzle at all, she announced to herself. It's a test of whether you're willing to accept that some problems don't have traditional solutions. She approached the last floating piece, and instead of trying to fit it into the existing structure, she changed her perspective until the entire puzzle rearranged itself around the piece. The whole configuration suddenly made perfect sense, like a 3-dimensional optical illusion that had finally resolved. Challenge 2 complete, the Arena AI announced. Dr. Elena Vasquez, 11 minutes, 34 seconds. Champion Zixara, 14 minutes, 12 seconds. The arena fell silent again. This wasn't luck anymore. This wasn't beginner's fortune. Elena had just outperformed the greatest tactical mind in galactic history on a mental challenge. Zixara's electromagnetic field flickered with something that might have been respect or confusion or fear. Her species had spent millions of years developing superior mental processing power. How was this primitive being from nowhere outthinking her? Analysis, she called to Elena as the puzzle dissolved around them. How did you solve the final section so quickly? Elena looked up at the towering Chronari champion. I stopped trying to make it fit what I expected it to be, and started letting it show me what it actually was. That is, not a strategy. Maybe not, Elena agreed, but it seems to work. In the viewing pods, representatives from dozens of species were having urgent conversations with their home worlds. What they were witnessing wasn't just one human performing well, it was a completely different approach to existence itself. The ancient crystalline elders, whose civilization was older than most stars, were particularly intrigued. Their representative, a massive crystal formation that had been alive for millennia, pulsed with slow, deep thoughts. In all our eons, the elder communicated through resonant frequencies, we have seen many species rise and fall. They optimize for strength or intelligence or technology or harmony. This species optimizes for change itself. Is that not unstable? Asked a younger crystal. Perhaps. Or perhaps it is the most stable strategy of all. How do you defeat something that becomes whatever it needs to become? Zixara was asking herself the same question. She had trained her entire life to face any challenge, but she had always assumed challenges would follow certain patterns. Stronger opponents could be outmaneuvered. Smarter opponents could be overpowered. More advanced opponents could be out-strategized. Elena wasn't any of those things. Elena was something else entirely. As they prepared for Challenge 3, Zixara realized she was no longer fighting for dominance. She was fighting to understand what she was facing. For the first time in her life, the greatest warrior in galactic history wasn't sure if winning was even the point anymore. In her notebook, Elena wrote, Challenge 2 complete. Note, assumption that problems have fixed solutions may be limiting. Factor for most species. Human advantage appears to be willingness to change approach mid-solution. Very interesting implications. She looked up at the arena's vast ceiling, where thousands of alien spectators were staring down at her with expressions ranging from confusion to fascination to something approaching awe. Challenge 3 should be interesting, she said to herself, and meant it. Around the galaxy, on 100 different worlds, beings were beginning to ask a question that would change everything. What else might humans be capable of? The arena transformed once more, but this time the change was so dramatic that several spectators gasped audibly. The floor expanded into a vast landscape complete with mountains, rivers, forests, and what appeared to be a small ocean. The ceiling became an artificial sky with a red sun that cast strange shadows across the terrain. Challenge 4, the announcer proclaimed, his voice now carrying a tone of genuine excitement. The ultimate survival test. Contestants must establish a thriving colony on the hostile world of Zerion 7. Time acceleration is set to 1001 ratio. You have 24 hours to create what must survive for 24 simulated years. Elena looked out at the landscape with the same analytical expression she had worn for the previous challenges. But this time, something was different. This time, she was smiling. In the viewing pods, the excitement was electric. This was the challenge that separated true leaders from mere warriors. Colony establishment required not just survival skills, but planning, resource management, innovation, and the ability to think decades ahead. Zixara's 4 arms were already moving, electromagnetic energy crackling around her as she began scanning the environment. Chronari were master terraformers. They had transformed dozens of worlds to suit their needs. Her approach would be systematic and efficient. Identify resources, establish power generation, create atmospheric processors, and build infrastructure that could support a Chronari-style civilization. Elena, meanwhile, was walking slowly across the terrain, not building anything, but simply observing. What is the human doing? Trade Minister Colvin asked his aide. She's wasting valuable time. Every minute counts in colony establishment. But Ambassador Thexel was watching more carefully. He had learned something about Elena during the previous challenges. When she appeared to be doing nothing, she was actually doing everything. Elena knelt beside a strange purple plant and carefully took samples. She watched the movement patterns of small lizard-like creatures. She tested the water in 3 different locations. She even lay down on the ground for several minutes, apparently listening to something only she could hear. The soil composition varies significantly across regions, she noted in her tablet. The local flora has adapted to extract specific minerals. The fauna shows evidence of complex social behaviors. And there's a subtle vibration pattern, probably underground water systems or maybe geological activity. Zixara was making impressive progress. Her electromagnetic abilities allowed her to extract and process raw materials quickly. She had already established a power grid using crystalline energy collectors and was beginning construction of atmospheric processors that would slowly transform the environment to better suit carbon-based life. It was exactly what any sensible colony builder would do: change the world to match the needs of the colonists. Elena took a completely different approach. Instead of fighting the purple vegetation, she began cultivating it. Her xenobiology training had taught her to recognize adaptive mutations, and these plants had clearly evolved something special. After careful analysis, she discovered they could process the planet's unusual atmospheric composition into something breathable for a wide variety of species. Instead of avoiding the lizard-like creatures, she observed their behavior patterns and discovered they were highly intelligent pack hunters with complex social structures. More importantly, they had already solved the planet's major survival challenges. Elena began leaving small offerings of food in specific patterns, following protocols she had learned from animal behavior studies on Earth. "Fascinating," she murmured as the creatures began responding to her offerings. "They have a sophisticated communication system, and they're curious about new things rather than automatically hostile. Classic signs of adaptive intelligence." By the end of the first simulated year, the differences between the two approaches were becoming clear. Zixara had established an impressive technological base. Her colony had reliable power, controlled atmosphere, defensive systems, and manufacturing capabilities. It was a perfect example of advanced galactic engineering, imposing order on chaos through superior technology and planning. Elena's colony looked completely different. Instead of technological structures, she had created something that looked almost organic. The purple plants formed living walls that cleaned the air and provided food. The lizard creatures had not only accepted her presence but had begun helping with construction, their natural abilities perfectly suited to working with the local materials. "She's not building a colony," observed Queen Voice Clixandra of the Hive Mind. "She's joining an existing ecosystem." "Explain the distinction," requested one of her subordinates. "The Chronari approach is to create a new system and force the environment to support it. The human approach is to become part of the existing system and help it evolve to support her." In the viewing section for the Ethereal Collective, excited harmonic patterns were being exchanged. "The human demonstrates perfect ecological integration," one ethereal communicated. "She is not conquering the world. She is helping the world conquer its limitations." "Such an approach requires unprecedented trust," responded another. "Most species control their environment because they fear it. The human appears to understand it instead." By the 10th simulated year, both colonies were thriving, but in completely different ways. Zixara's settlement had grown into an impressive technological center. Factories produced goods for trade, defensive systems protected against any threat, and carefully controlled environments supported a growing population. It was efficient, powerful, and completely independent of the local ecosystem. Elena's colony had become something else entirely. The distinction between her settlement and the natural environment had almost disappeared. The purple plants had evolved new varieties that produced different types of food and materials. The lizard creatures had developed new behaviors that made them perfect partners for complex construction projects. Even the geology seemed different. The underground water systems now flowed in patterns that supported both the original ecosystem and Elena's additions. How is that possible? Zixara asked aloud, her electromagnetic senses analyzing Elena's colony with growing confusion. Evolutionary changes cannot occur that rapidly. Elena looked up from where she was working with a group of lizard creatures to design a new type of shelter. Oh, you're right that natural evolution is slower, but if you understand the existing genetic potential and provide the right environmental pressures, you can guide adaptive changes much faster. You are deliberately evolving the local species? We're evolving together, Elena corrected. I'm learning from them as much as they're learning from me. The purple plants taught me about mineral processing. The lizards showed me how to work with the geological structures instead of against them. In return, I've introduced concepts like crop rotation and tool use. Zixara stared at the human. This wasn't just colony building, this was accelerated evolution guided by intelligence and cooperation. By the 20th simulated year, the test results were undeniable. Zixara's colony could support exactly the population it was designed for, using exactly the resources it had planned to use. It was stable, efficient, and sustainable within its planned parameters. Elena's colony had become something unprecedented. The population included not just humans, but multiple species working together. The resource production had actually increased the planet's overall capacity to support life. Most remarkably, the colony had begun spreading beneficial changes to areas far beyond its borders, improving the entire planetary ecosystem. Challenge 4 complete, the Arena AI announced. Champion Zixara has established a successful technological colony with 94% efficiency ratings. Dr. Elena Vasquez has created an integrated biological system with 847% productivity increases over baseline planetary capacity. The arena was no longer quiet. The arena was stunned. 847%. Elena hadn't just succeeded at the challenge. She had redefined what success meant. Ambassador Thexel was completely rewriting his report. Again. The implications of what he was witnessing went far beyond the trials. If humans could integrate with alien ecosystems this effectively, if they could guide cooperative evolution between species, if they could make entire worlds more productive— Sir, his aide whispered urgently, I'm receiving priority communications from 17 different worlds. They all want to know the same thing, which is whether Earth is open to trade negotiations. Down in the arena, Zixara was experiencing something she had never felt before, the realization that her approach to problems might not be the best possible approach. For her entire life, for her entire civilization's history, the Chronari had succeeded by being stronger, smarter, and more technologically advanced than everyone else. They conquered challenges through superior capability. Elena had just demonstrated that some challenges could be solved better through cooperation than conquest. One challenge remains, the announcer declared. The final test will determine not just the winner of these trials, but perhaps the future of galactic civilization itself. Elena was checking her equipment and making notes about the colony challenge. She looked completely calm, as if she had just completed a routine scientific experiment rather than something that was changing. The arena began its final transformation, and this time the change was unlike anything the spectators had ever seen. Instead of creating a single environment, the arena divided itself into dozens of shifting zones. One section blazed with the heat of a desert world, while another froze with Arctic conditions. Gravity fluctuated wildly from zone to zone. Atmospheric composition changed every few minutes. Some areas simulated underwater conditions, others the vacuum of space. The final challenge, the announcer declared, his voice carrying a weight that seemed to press down on the entire stadium. Adaptive combat in multi-environmental conditions. Victory requires not just defeating your opponent, but mastering every planetary condition in the galaxy simultaneously. Elena looked around at the chaotic landscape and did something completely unexpected. She laughed. Something amuses you? Zixara asked, her forearms already crackling with electromagnetic energy as she prepared for battle. I'm sorry, Elena said, still smiling. It's just... This is exactly the kind of challenge Earth prepared me for, except Earth didn't do it on purpose. The Chronari champion tilted her crystalline head. Explain. Earth is what we call a death world, Elena said, checking her equipment one final time. Extreme weather changes, dangerous wildlife, unstable geology, toxic plants, deadly diseases, and natural disasters that can happen without warning. Most galactic species would consider my home planet uninhabitable. In the viewing pods, several beings were quickly accessing Earth's environmental data. What they found made them reconsider everything they thought they knew about human toughness. Atmospheric composition varies by region, Trade Minister Colvin read aloud. Temperature ranges from 70 to plus 60 degrees Celsius. Gravity varies due to altitude differences. Regular seismic activity. Frequent storms capable of destroying cities, radiation exposure from solar activity, toxic biological agents in most ecosystems. His aide looked up from his own data tablet. Sir, according to these readings, Earth is classified as a Class H, hazard world. Most species need extensive environmental suits just to visit safely. And humans evolved there naturally? Apparently, down in the arena, the final challenge had begun. As expected, Zixara was magnificent. Her electromagnetic abilities let her adapt to each environmental zone with precision and power. In the desert section, she created cooling fields around herself. In the Arctic zone, she generated heat. When gravity shifted, she adjusted her electromagnetic field to maintain stability. She was the perfect example of advanced galactic evolution, overcoming any obstacle through superior capability. Elena took a completely different approach. Again. Instead of fighting each environment, she moved through them like someone who had lived with environmental chaos her entire life. In the desert zone, she didn't create cooling fields. She adjusted her behavior to conserve water and moved during the brief periods when shadows provided natural cooling. In the Arctic section, she didn't generate heat. She used techniques for maintaining body temperature that humans had developed over thousands of years of living in harsh conditions. But more than that, Elena was studying how the environments connected to each other. The atmospheric pressure changes create predictable wind patterns between zones, she noted while dodging through a gravity fluctuation area. The temperature differences cause air currents that can be used for rapid movement. And the electromagnetic fields from the desert zone are creating interference patterns with the Arctic zone that could be really useful. Zixara was winning every direct confrontation. When they met in the same environmental zone, her superior strength and technology gave her clear advantages. But Elena wasn't trying to win direct confrontations. Elena was turning the entire arena into her ally. She began moving in patterns that used the environmental changes themselves as weapons and tools. When Zixara chased her into the desert zone, Elena timed her movement so that the Chronari champion arrived just as the temperature spiked beyond even her thermal regulation capabilities. When combat moved to the gravity shift area, Elena used the fluctuations to change direction in ways that her larger opponent couldn't match. Impossible, Zixara said, her electromagnetic field flickering with frustration. You are not stronger than me. You are not faster. Your technology is primitive. How are you gaining advantage? Elena paused in her movement, standing in a relatively stable zone where the environmental conditions weren't too extreme. I'm not trying to gain advantage over you, she said. I'm trying to understand the pattern of the whole system. Combat is not about understanding systems. Combat is about defeating opponents. Maybe, Elena agreed. But what if there's a third option? Before Zixara could ask what she meant, Elena did something that changed everything. She stopped running. Instead of continuing to evade and maneuver, Elena planted herself in the center of the arena and began helping. When Zixara was struggling with a particularly chaotic environmental transition, Elena called out warnings about pressure changes. When the Chronari champion was caught in a zone where her electromagnetic abilities were being dampressed by atmospheric interference, Elena pointed out a path to more stable conditions. "What are you doing?" Zixara demanded, her confusion evident, even through her electronic modulation. "Demonstrating something," Elena replied, continuing to provide tactical advice to her opponent. These environmental challenges aren't really random. They're following patterns based on how different planetary systems actually work. If we map those patterns together, we can predict the changes and help each other navigate them more safely. The arena fell completely silent. Elena was actively helping her opponent succeed in a challenge that was supposed to determine galactic supremacy. Ambassador Thexel was frantically updating his report for the 4th time. "She's not trying to win," he said to his aide. "She's trying to change what winning means." "Is that legal?" "I don't think anyone ever considered the possibility." Down in the arena, something unprecedented was happening. Elena and Zixara were no longer fighting each other. They were working together to solve the environmental challenges, with Elena's analytical abilities complementing Zixara's technological capabilities. When they cooperated, they didn't just survive the chaotic conditions, they mastered them completely. "Challenge completion detected," the arena AI announced, its voice carrying a note of confusion. "Both contestants have successfully demonstrated mastery of all environmental conditions. However, victory protocols are unclear due to unprecedented collaborative approach." Elena looked up at the massive screens showing confused arena officials. "If I could make a suggestion," she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the stadium's amplification systems, "maybe the real test isn't who can defeat who. Maybe it's whether we can find ways to make each other better." She turned to Zixara. "Your electromagnetic abilities are incredible. My species has some interesting ideas about environmental adaptation. What if we combined those approaches? What could we accomplish together that neither of us could do alone?" Zixara stared at the small human who had just offered partnership instead of demanding victory. For her entire life, she had been taught that strength meant the ability to defeat others. Elena was demonstrating a completely different kind of strength, the ability to make others stronger. "The mining rights to Sector 7 Alpha," Zixara said slowly. "You would share them?" "I'd rather we figure out how to use those resources to benefit everyone," Elena replied. "Quantum fold crystals could revolutionize space travel for every species in the galaxy. Why should that benefit only one world?" In the viewing pods, representatives from dozens of civilizations were having urgent conversations with their home governments. What Elena was proposing wasn't just a change in who controlled the sector, it was a change in how galactic politics could work. The ancient crystalline elder pulsed with slow, deep thoughts. "In millions of years, we have seen countless species rise through conquest. This is the first time we have witnessed a species offer to rise through cooperation." Trade Minister Colvin was already calculating economic projections. "If Earth's approach spreads," he told his aide, "it could change everything. Instead of competing for limited resources, species could work together to expand available resources. Sir, should we consider joining this partnership?" Before Colvin could answer, Elena had climbed onto one of the arena's platforms and was addressing the entire stadium. "I know this wasn't the kind of victory anyone expected," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive arena. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe the biggest challenges facing all our species aren't the kind that can be solved by having one winner and everyone else lose." She gestured to Zixara, who had joined her on the platform. "Champion Zixara has capabilities my people can barely imagine. But my people have approaches to problems that could help her achieve things she never considered possible. Together, we might find solutions that neither of us would discover alone." climate adaptation, resource management, conflict resolution, exploration of hostile environments. These are challenges every species faces. What if instead of competing over who gets to face them alone, we